Hello everyone, welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding in Mishnah Berurah Chelik Vav, and we will be learning today Mitzvah Hashem Daf Kuf Lamed Gimel Amid Beis. We are continuing to learn the halachas of Sukkos, and we begin today on Kuf Lamed Gimel Amid Beis with Siman Tafresh Samach Dalid Seder Yom Hoshana Rabbah, the proper procedures for the day of Hoshana Rabbah, the seventh day of Sukkos. Uba Yud Aleph Seifim, and here we have 11 Seifim. Says the Mechaber in Sif Aleph. B'yom Shvi Shehu Hoshana Rabbah, on the seventh day of Sukkot, which is known colloquially as Hoshana Rabbah. Now, the term Hoshana, on Hoshana Rabbah we talk about the Hoshanas. Now, we know that the Hoshanas are really aravas. That's what they are. It's a bundle of 5 aravas. Yet we call them Hoshanas. The Gemara in Sukkah, in several different places, refers to the Agudas Halulav, to the Igud of the Lulav, the Hadassim, and the Aravas as the Hoshana. Why is it called a Hoshana? So if you take a look at Rashi and Daf Lamed Aleph, Amid Aleph, Rashi says the reason it's called a Hoshana is, and I'm paraphrasing Rashi, I believe this is what Rashi means, is that on Yom Tov, when do we take the lulav bundle? When do we take the dalad minim? We take it primarily, we've seen many times, that the Iker mitzvah is by Hallel. And by Hallel, we take it by Haidul Hashem Kitov and by Ana Hashem Hoshiana. And that comes from the pasuk of Hoshia Hashem es Amecha, right? Hosha, or is it Hosha Hashem es Amcha? Wow, I forgot the pasuk. I forgot the pasuk. My bad. Excuse me. All right, whatever. Here it is. Ve'imru Hoshienu. That's what it is. The pasuk is Ve'imru Hoshienu, and that's why we take the dalad bina by Ana Hashem Hoshiana. So we're saying Hoshana. We're asking the Rabban Shalom to help us. So since we take the lulav bundle by Hoshana, another way to reference the lulav bundle is to call it a Hoshana. Certainly the aravas that we take on Hoshana Rabbah, we have many extended tefillas on Hoshana Rabbah where we keep on saying Ana Hashem Hoshiana, Ana Hoshana. So certainly it is there's a strong reason to call the aravas that we take on Hoshana Rabbah Hoshanas. And since we spend so much time with the lulav bundle and with the Hoshanas, aka the aravas, on Hoshana Rabbah, the day of Hoshana Rabbah is called Hoshana Rabbah, the day of increased Hoshanas. So b'yom shvi shehu Hoshana Rabbah nehagim laharbais b'mizmayrim kemay b'yom tov. We add on to the Psuke de Zimra, we add on all of the kapitlach that we normally would say on Shabbos and Yom Tov, we add them on Hoshana Rabbah, because as we're going to see, to a certain extent, we treat Hoshana Rabbah as a Yom Tov. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Katan Aleph Rabbah, Nehagim Yisrael lihiyos ne'orim b'leil arava. The Mishnah Berurah brings down the minig over here, and he brings it down from the Shibboleth Leket. He says it's brought by the Magen Avram to stay up late at night, or maybe stay up the whole night on Hoshana Rabbah. Ukvar nitfas haseder, and already in the days of the Chavetz Chaim, he says you could find the printed Tikkun Leil Hoshana Rabbah, which some people would go through the whole Sefer Dvarim. We're going to see there was a minig, and there still is a minig in some places, where they lane the entire Sefer Dvarim to hear about Teichacha and Yiras Hashem from Sefer Dvarim. So there was already a minig kanmainim to stay up the whole night, the night of Hoshana Rabbah. Ois cotton bays, we add mizmayrim k'may b'yom tov, similar to Yom Tov. Why? Why is Hoshana Rabbah similar to a Yom Tov? Says the Chavetz Chaim l'fisha b'chag nidoinen al hamayim, because we know that on Sukkot we are judged for water. V'hu gemar hachasima, and Hoshana Rabbah is the end of the Yomim Noraim. That's the gemar chasima. V'ayimrim lamnatzeach hashamayim esaprim k'vayt kel u'sha'arei mizmayrim. All the kapitlach that we add to Psuke de Zimra on Shabbos and Yom Tov, u'kedushas musaf na'aritzcha, and by musaf we say either keser nusach svard or na'aritzcha v'nagdishcha for nusach ashkenaz, k'may b'Yom Tov, similar to Yom Tov. Now we go to the Ramah. Says the Ramah Haggah, ve'ein oimrim nishmas. However, we do not say nishmas. Says the Mishnah Berurah cut in Gimel, ve'ein oimrim nishmas el yishtabach de be'emes hu chayil. We go straight to yishtabach from Oz Yashir. We don't say nishmas because in reality it's a day of chayil. It's not a day of Yom Tov, and it's brought down that there is no neshama yisera on Hoshana Rabbah, and that's one reason not to say nishmas. Also, it's brought down. I forgot whose lashon this is. It's brought down that the neshama is not strengthened. I'm not sure if that's a reference to the neshama yisera. The neshama is not strengthened the way the neshama is on Shabbos and Yom Tov, and therefore the neshama doesn't sing shira the same way it does on Shabbos and Yom Tov, and therefore it's not appropriate to recite nishmas. Continue with the Ramah. So the Ramah said, "Ve'ein oimrim nishmas." We do not recite nishmas. Va'oimrim mizmar l'soida. We do say mizmar l'soida because there's no reason not to. We don't say mizmar l'soida on Yom Tov because we don't bring a carbon toida on Yom Tov. Carbon toida is a personal carbon. We don't bring a carbon nedava like a carbon toida on Shabbos or on Yom Tov. But on Hoshana Rabbah we could bring a carbon toida, and therefore it is appropriate to say mizmar l'soida. V'oimrim ein kamocha shema Yisrael v'chulei. And the Ramah says, when we take out the Sefer Torah for Kriyas HaTorah, we say ein kamocha. The Chazan says Shema Yisrael, Echad Elokeinu, Gadol Ol Hashem Iti. V'chulei, I believe that that's a reference. We say the Gabbai, when he calls up the Aliyas, he says V'yazar, not V'sikala V'seiraya, K'moi b'Yom Tov, similar to Yom Tov. The Mishnah Berurah, nice cut and dalet, says K'moi b'Yom Tov, Ritzon l'loymar b'nigun shel Yom Tov. So here the Mishnah Berurah makes reference to the fact that we use the nusach of Yom Tov. The Aruch HaShulchan brings down the minig to use the nusach of Yomim Naraim. Since it's a Yom Adin, we use primarily the nusach of Yomim Naraim. In certain places we use the nusach of Yom Tov. So we kind of we're treating this day in a very interesting way. We're treating it on the one hand like a day of Yomim Naraim with Yom Naraim nusach. On another hand, we're treating it like Yom Tov with Yom Tov Nusach, and we still also, to a certain extent, treat it like Chalamayid, because Lamaisa, it's not really a day of Yom Tov. Weiter in the Ramah, V'oimrim Kaddish ala akat tfilas Musaf b'nigud Yom Tov. The Kaddish after the Chazaras Hashatz of Musaf should be done with the Nigun of Yom Tov. Ve'ein regilin lasais malacha shel chayil. And says the Ramah, we don't do weekday malacha ad achar yitzia mi beis hakneses until we leave shul. Kol zman we're in shul and we're davening on Hoshana Rabbah, we treat it to a certain extent like a day of Yom Tov, and therefore we shouldn't do malacha. And says the Mishnah Berurah, shel chayil, we don't do malacha shel chayil. V'yesh mesirin me'atzman afilu akis shel mois. Some people take the wallet out of their pocket, and that's because they don't want it to look like a weekday where I have my wallet and I'm ready to be busy with masa umata, and I'm ready to do business, I'm ready to buy and sell. No, it's a shtickle of Yom Tov. Continues the Chavetz Chaim, a nice cut in hay. This that they would collect what he calls Ma'is Esrik. Now, I've seen some people refer to this as they would collect funds to buy the Daled Minim for the following year. I've seen other places where this is just a euphemism for tzedakah that was collected on Yom Tov. They called it Ma'is Esrik. So even though we're treating it a little bit like Yom Tov, and we're saying that people even left their wallets at home, still in all, there was a minig to collect this Ma'is Esrig, mipnei sheroiv hakol misasfin b'Hoshana Rabbah, because you would have a lot of people in shul by the minyan on Hoshana Rabbah. V'yesh revach l'tzedakah mizeh, and the Pri Megadim says, since tzedakah could make extra money because there's more people there on Hoshana Rabbah, we're not going to refrain from collecting tzedakah. Continues the Ramah 3 lines down into the Siman, last word on the line. V'yesh loymar pizmain zechar bris kisheyesh mila b'Hoshana Rabbah. If there would be a bris mila in shul, the Ramah says you should say this pizmain of zechar bris. V'omer ma'isai kaidam ana ezoin chin. You would say it before this piyut of ana ezoin chin, which I am not familiar with. Says the Mishnah Berurah cut vav kaidam ana ezoin chin v'yosei tayv l'amrei kaid v'charos habeit labris. Okay. Continues the Ramah 4 lines down into the Siman. Kasva Rishonim Zal, the Rishonim write, Sheyesh Siman B'Tzeil Halavana, Baleil Hoshana Rabbah. There is a siman, there is some kind of sign that can be seen in the shadow of the moon on the night of Hoshana Rabbah, Masha Yikra Loi Olikroivav Ba'isa Hashana, what will transpire to a person or to his relatives during that year. There are those that write that we should not pay attention to this, because that actually could make his mazel worse. One explanation that I've seen of this is we have to remember, this goes into the department, I'm looking for the right English word, it's not coming to me, of the mazolos. And I think I've spoken in this share about the mazolos previously. The mazolos, the stars and the tzva hashamayim, those are, so to speak, middlemen. They are emtsoyim that the Ribbono Shel Olam uses to have a causative effect on what happens here on this world. When we talk about astrologers reading the stars, it's not magic. It's a technology that we are no longer familiar with. The same way the meteorologists could take a look at the positions of the clouds and the warm front and the cold front and this and that, and they could predict the weather, right? So they're not doing magic. They understand that the weather systems of the world are the emtsoyim. They are the physical causative elements that cause the weather patterns of the world, and they know how to read them. The astrological signs, the mazolos and the tzvar shamayim, are also causative elements. We no longer have that science. We don't understand how to look at the tzvar shamayim and say, oh, if the stars are positioned that way, that's going to have the following effect. But in earlier times, they did know how to read this. So the Ramah is bringing down that there are those that say that in the shadow of the moon, there is something that could be seen as to what will transpire to you or to your relatives during that year. But we don't really know how to read it. Somebody who pays attention to it may read it the wrong way. And if he reads it the wrong way, that alone might damage his mazel. First of all, it changes his whole perspective on his life. Somebody sees something and he sees that something bad is going to happen to him, chas v'chalila. Really, he might even be wrong. But now he's going to comport himself differently for the rest of the year. Maybe he's going to be depressed. Maybe he's going to make bad decisions because he thinks he knows what's going to happen. So that definitely could cause a reus, a weakness in his mazel. Others want to say that maybe he will actually read it right and he'll see that taka something is going to happen bad. But let's remember that Yisrael, Klal Yisrael, is Lamaila min Hamazalos, right? Avram, before his name was changed to Avraham, Avram saw in the astrology that he wasn't destined to have children. But guess what? Avram Avinu is not meshubed to the mazolos. The Rebbe Shalom changed his name to Avram and he had children. Klal Yisrael is not meshubed to the mazolos. It doesn't matter what you see in the mazolos. The Ribbono Shel Olam controls our destiny. Hashgacha pratis. The Ribbono Shel Olam controls our destiny, so it doesn't matter what you see in the mazolos because the Ribbono Shel Olam could always change it for us. So a person who goes and he puts his betachin in the mazolos, then maybe the Ribbono Shel Olam will say, oh, okay, you want to follow the mazolos? Well, guess what? The mazolos have something bad in store for you. You want to go with that? Fine, go with that. I won't help you. So therefore, that's another reason why looking into the mazolos could create a reisa in the mazel. So in any case, the Ramah says that some people know how to do this. And certainly, most people have no idea what they're looking at. It is much better, like the Ribbono Shel Olam tells us, Tamim tihya im Hashem Elokecha. Person is supposed to have complete faith in the Ribbono Shel Olam. And don't try to look into the future. Kain Nir Ali says the Ramah. Why do people look in the future? People look in the future because they feel a need to control their own destiny. They feel that they need to know what's going to happen. Why does a Yid need to know what to happen? A Yid has the Emunah and Betachin in the Ribbono Shel Olam. What's going to happen is exactly what the Ribbono Shel Olam wants to happen. That's what's going to happen. And the Ribbono Shel Olam will take care of me. So why do I have to know the Asidus? Why am I interested in knowing the Asidus? Adarabah, knowing the Asidus could make it worse for me. I look at the Asidus, now suddenly I want to do this, I want to do that, maybe I could change this, maybe I could change that. It's better off not knowing the Asidus. The Rebbeinu Shalom takes care of me. What the Rebbeinu Shalom will do is, that's what the Rebbeinu Shalom will do, and it'll all be good. Okay. Weiter, says the Mechaber, Umarbim Ktsas B'Nerois, some people have the minig to add Nerois, K'may B'Yom HaKippurim, like is the minig on Yom Kippur. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Zayin K'may B'Yom HaKippurim, Lefisha B'Chag Nidoin and Alamayim. Again, because the Chag, Sukkot, is the time when we're judged on water. And like many of the Acharayim say, life boils down to water. Whenever the scientists want to look at another planet and want to see if it's capable of sustaining life, the first thing they're looking for is H2O. The first thing they're looking for is water. So water is parnasa, water is life, water is everything. So if b'chag nidoinen alamayim, that means that we're being judged on the chag. V'chol chayei adam tluyin b'mayim. The Mishnah says it right here. The entire life of a person, it rests on water. And everything goes after the chasima, after the signing of the Gzar Din, which takes place on this great day of Hoshana Rabbah. Let's go weiter, says the Ramah. Weiter, 4 lines up from the bottom. Hagav hamadaktikim naigim litbal atzman kaidam alois hashachar kamay be'erev yom kippurim. Those that are medaktikim, those that are precise about their mitzvahs in the Yerush Shamayim, had a minig to go to the mikveh on Hoshana Rabbah before Alois HaShachar, K'may Be'erev Yom HaKippurim. V'yesh naigim lo b'sh hakittel. Some people have the minig to wear a kittel, K'may B'Yom Kippur, as is the minig on Yom Kippur. Says the Mishnah Berurah Katan Ches, Kaidam Alois HaShachar, to go to the mikveh before Alois HaShachar. V'toiv Yosef Litmar Mi Ba'erev, the Chavetz Chaim brings down over here, from in the name of the Achrayim, that it's even better to go to the mikveh the evening before the evening of Hoshana Rabbah. Kidei lilmod kol halayla b'kedusha. That way, if you're going to stay up and learn Torah Hoshana Rabbah at night, you should learn it b'kedusha. Go to the mikveh first. Be mekadosh yourself with the mikveh first, and then stay up the whole night learning Torah. V'oides hazivug, as far as marital relations, Hoshana Rabbah at night, who k'moyu b'leil shvuos. Interestingly enough, the Chavetz Chaim says over here that is the same as on Shavuos. Now, what's interesting about that is that in other places, like Shavuos, where the Chavetz Chaim mentions to refrain from marital relations on Shavuos night, he's bringing it from the Chidah. And the Chidah mentions several other days. There's Shavuos night, the first night of Pesach, Shmini Atzeres, Rosh Hashanah. So the Chidah brings down these days, but the Chidah does not mention Hoshana Rabbah, and the Chidah even says that you could have marital relations all of the nights of Sukkot, seemingly including Hoshana Rabbah. So when the Chavetz Chaim says here, Oidos Hazivaku Kamo B'Leil Shavuos, he's not coming from the Chidah, he's coming from elsewhere. I don't know where he's coming from, but he's coming from elsewhere. But the Chavetz Chaim, compares it to the night of Shavuos. If your wife is going to the mikvah on that night, then it is certainly appropriate to have marital relations on that night. And we have to remember that certainly somebody who has the need to engage in marital relations on such a night definitely should. This is not some kind of daraisa. This is not some kind of halacha l'Moshe Sinai. This is not one of the gimel chamuros. This is something which is a minig for people that are on that level. So people who have the recognition of Hoshana Rabbah as a Yom Adin, they're staying up the whole night to learn Torah. If they're staying up the whole night to learn Torah, they're not engaging in marital relations anyway. So people who are on that level, there's an Indian to refrain from marital relations Hoshana Rabbah by night. Some people have the minig to wear the kittel, she'asu gemar hachasima, again because it's the day of Gemar Din, of a medina seinu nagil by big day Shabbos. In our medinas, Chavetz Chaim says the minig is to wear big day Shabbos on Hoshana Rabbah, levada shliach tzibur levish a kittel, while the shliach tzibur, he wears a kittel. Now we go to the words of the Mechaber, 2 lines from the bottom, and the reason for all of this is Lefisha B'chagni Dainin Al Hamayim. V'nayagim lahater ba yigudai shalulav. There was a minig, says the Mechaber, to open up the binding of the lulav bundle. Now the Berurah says over here Pirush Milamala. He brings down from the Rekeach. It sounds like what the Berurah is saying was, there was a minig to release the rings at the top of the lulav, but not to take apart the lulav bundle. They left the lulav bundle tied together. Somehow they opened up the rings on top. Umakifin sheva pa'amim, and you go around the bima 7 times. Umarbim takanunim al hamayim, and we are mispalel for mayim, or mispalel for water, for rain, because mechag nidoinin al hamayim. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cutting yud. Umakifin sheva pa'amim, we go around the bima 7 times. Kamoi b'migdash, similar to what was done in the Beis Hamikdash, shayom akifin hamizbeach bazeh hayom sheva pa'amim, where they would encircle the mizbeach 7 times on Hoshana Rabbah. Sif Beis, says the Machaber, v'noitlim arava b'yom zeh. On this day of Hoshana Rabbah, we take the bundle of the haravas, the bundle of the Hoshanas, milavad arava shebalulav, besides the aravas that are in the lulav. Ve'ein mevarchin aleha, however, we do not make a bracha on the taking of the Hoshanas. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cutting Yud Aleph. V'noitlim arava b'yom zeh, we take the Hoshana bundle on this day. Beautiful Mishnah Berurah over here, a very basic Mishnah Berurah to understanding Hoshana Rabbah. The reason we take the Hoshanas on Hoshana Rabbah is Zecher LaMigdash. This is a Zecher, a remembrance for what was done in the Beis Hamikdash. Shenetilas arava hayasham halacha laMoshe miSinai. The taking of the Hoshanas in the Beis Hamikdash was a daraisa, it was a halacha laMoshe miSinai. The taking of the Hoshanas in the Beis Hamikdash. V'chein haisa mitzvasa. And this was the procedure, this was the mitzvah of taking the Hoshanas in the Beis HaMikdash. And now the Mishnah Berurah is going to take straight from the Rambam's description of the mitzvah. B'chol yom mishivas hayamim, on each of the 7 days of Sukkot, hayu mevian aravos, they would bring aravos. Now, by the way, these aravos were 11 amos tall, so they were approximately somewhere between 17 and 18 feet long, these aravos. Hayumevian aravos, they brought aravos, v'zoikvin oisana kahanim al tzadei hamizbeach, and the kahanim would stand them up from the floor on the sides of the mizbeach, and they would go up over the mizbeach. V'achakach, and then later, after the kahanim would stand these aravos up around the mizbeach, Bayin ha'am, people would come, v'noitl noisan misham, and they would take the aravos, those aravos from the mizbeach, u'minanin oisan, and they would make na'anuim with the aravos. Na'anuim, like we do with the with the lulav and esrog. They would make na'anuim with these aravos. Now notice that the Mishnah Berurah did not say a word over here about hakafas. The reason he doesn't say a word about hakafas is because he's taking this from the Rambam. The shita of the Rambam was that the hakafas around the mizbeach were never made with Hoshanas. The Rambam held that the hakafas around the mizbeach, all Yom Tov, including Hoshana Rabbah, were done with the daled minim, with the lulav and esrog, not with the aravos. What was done with the aravos? The aravos were stood up around the mizbeach, and then people came and made nanuim with them. Others hold that the aravos were taken, the kahanim made hakafas with the aravos around the mizbeach, then they stood them up around the mizbeach, and then people took them. But the Rambam held that you never made hakafas with the aravos. Now the Mishnah Berurah addresses a question. We know that there's a mitzvah daraisa to take the daled minim in the Beis Hamikdash all 7 days of Yom Tov. Outside the Beis Hamikdash, there's a mitzvah daraisa only the first day. Zecher lemigdash, the Chazal will masakin that we should take the daled minim outside the Beis Hamikdash all 7 days. Frek the Mishnah Berurah, why weren't Chazal masakin that we should take the Hoshanas every day of Yom Tov? The same way Chazal will masakin that we should take the daled minim every day of Yom Tov outside the Beis Hamikdash, Zecher lemigdash. So why don't we take the Hoshanas outside the Beis Hamikdash every day of Yom Tov, Zecher LeMikdash? After all, in the Beis Hamikdash, it was done all 7 days. It was done, there was a more complex ceremony on Hoshana Rabbah, but the ceremony of the Hoshanas was done in the Beis Hamikdash all 7 days. So why don't we do it now outside the Beis Hamikdash all 7 days, Zecher LeMikdash? Answers the Mishnah Berurah. It is for this reason that Chazal were not misakin to take the Hashanahs all 7 days of Yom Tov outside the Beis Hamikdash, Zeichel Hamikdash, the way they were misakin it by the Daled Minim. Why? The Lulav, because the idea, the chiyuv to take Daled Minim outside the Beis Hamikdash, Islay Iker min HaTorah. There is a daraisa to take the Daled Minim outside the Beis Hamikdash. The Yom Rishon hu min HaTorah af begvulen. Because the mitzvah, there is a mitzvah daraisa to take the Daled Minim outside the Beis Hamikdash on the first day. So there is a daraisa of Daled Minim outside the Beis Hamikdash, only on the first day. But there is a daraisa. So then, Avdina lo Zeichel Hamikdash, so Zeichel Hamikdash, where there was a daraisa to take it all 7 days, so we take the Daled Minim all 7 days outside the Beis Hamikdash, Zeichel Hamikdash. Arava, the Lesla Iker ben HaTorah begvulen, but Hashanahs, there never was any mitzvah daraisa to do Hashanahs outside the Beis Hamikdash. The whole mitzvah of Hashanahs with daraisa only existed in the Beis Hamikdash. It never existed outside the Beis Hamikdash. So then now, Zeichel Hamikdash, Daisha never lo Zeichel Hamikdash Yom Echad. So we only do it now outside the Beis Hamikdash, Zeichel Hamikdash, on one day. Which day? The Kavu Yom Shvi La'arava Yosem Yom Acher. For that, the Chazal were misakin that we should do it on the 7th day, Hoshana Rabbah, Kevet Sheba Mikdash, Hayagam Ke Yosem Kedusha B'Yom Zeh. Because the 7th day in the Beis Hamikdash had a more complex ceremony with the Hashanahs than they did the rest of Yom Tov. On the 7th day, they made 7 hakafas. They did more on the 7th day. So if the Chazal wanted to pick one day that we should do it, Zeichel Hamikdash, outside the Beis Hamikdash, they chose day 7. Sharei Hayom Akifin Sheva Pabim B'Yom Zeh. Ois Kat Yud Beis, Ein Mevarchin Aleh, we don't make a bracha on the Hashanahs. Shurak Minig Neviim. She'en Higu Asa'an Lasis Kein, V'loi B'teres Takana. Chazal were not misakein the mitzvah of Hashanahs. It was a Minig HaNeviim. It was something that the Nevi'im taught us to do, but not b'teres takana. Therefore, we cannot say Asher Kiddushanu b'mitzvahs v'tzivanu. We don't have the mitzvah of loisasur on this minig hanavim. Difference between the takana, the chazal musakin, you must do this, and a minig hanavim, that the minig, the neviim were manig that we should do this. Not the same level. Now, there is a Sharet Tzion that I want to read over here on Kuf Lamed Gimel over Beis Sharet Tzion Ois Katan Vav. I told you that this description of the ceremony of the Hashanahs in the Beis Hamikdash was taken from the Rambam. Says the Chavetz Chaim in Ois Katan Vav in the Sharet Tzion, Lashon Rambam. This was taken from the Rambam. Uladidei hakafa haisa belulav levad. According to the Rambam, the hakafas around the mizbeach in the Beis Hamikdash were only done with the lulav and esrog. B'chol yom pamachas, every day of Sukkot they went around the mizbeach with the daled minim once. U'b'yom zeh, and on Hoshana Rabbah, sheva pamim. They went around the mizbeach 7 times, but only with the daled minim, not with the aravos. V'das Rashi, but the sheet of Rashi is the loyhoisa hakafa belulav klal, that they never made hakafas with the daled minim. Elo demitchila kishayu shluchei bezdin mevian ha'aravos. The way it worked was the shluchei bezdin brought aravos to the Beis Hamikdash. The people would accept the aravos for the shluchei bezdin and they would make nanuim. Then the Kehanim would take those aravos and make a hakafa around the mizbeach. And when they finished, they would stand them up around the mizbeach. Every day this was done once. And on Hoshana Rabbah was done 7 times. So again, according to the Rambam, what happened was the Shluchei Bezdin sent aravos. The Kehanim took the aravos, stood them up around the mizbeach. People came, they took the aravos, they made nanuim. The Kehanim took daled minim and they made a hakafa around the mizbeach with their daled minim. On the first 6 days of Yom Tov, they only made 1 hakafa. On the 7th day of Yom Tov, they made 7 hakafas with the daled minim. According to Rashi, that's not what happened. The Shluchei Bezdin sent aravos to the Beis Hamikdash. The people accepted the aravos, made nanuim. The Kehanim then took the aravos, made a hakafa around the mizbeach, and when they finished, they stood them up on the mizbeach. The first 6 days of Yom Tov, they only made 1 akaf around the Mizbeach. The 7th day of Yom Tov, they made 7 akafas around the Mizbeach. Okay, we're going to stop over here. We'll continue with the Ramah on top of Kuf Lam Daled Amud Aleph B'Yirtzeh Hashem in the next chair. Thank you so much for joining me for Liman HaTorah. The schus of Liman HaTorah should be making on Gans Klal Yisrael better than any vaccine. The Rabban Shalom should say Yeshua's refuah said Parnasa to all those in need and Shidduchim, and we should be zocheh to see the BS Gal Tzedek, but Meher of Yameinu, Amen. Be well.